The hum of the spacecraft's engines was a constant, low vibration that seeped through the metal walls, a comforting rhythm Lyra had grown accustomed to during her years as a pilot. But tonight, something in the air felt different. The cabin, dimly lit by the soft glow of control panels, felt more claustrophobic than usual. It wasn't just the smallness of the room or the heavy atmosphere that clung to every surface, it was him. He sat across from her, an unsettling figure of quiet composure, his form both alien and striking in the cold light. His presence was impossible to ignore, not because he made any effort to stand out, but because he simply did. His skin shimmered faintly, an eerie combination of metallic silver and deep cobalt that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Each movement he made was deliberate, fluid in a way that was almost too graceful for a being of his size. Lyra had never seen anything like him before, never felt the subtle pull of someone's presence the way she felt his. His eyes were the most unsettling part of all. They were dark, almost black, with flecks of gold swirling in their depths like embers caught in a midnight breeze. When he looked at her, it was as though he was peering into her very soul, pulling at thoughts and feelings she hadn't even realized were there. Lyra shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to shake the sensation, but the tension in her chest only tightened. They had only been in each other's presence for a few days, but it felt like an eternity. He had joined their crew under mysterious circumstances, an alien diplomat from a distant star system, shrouded in secrecy. No one had explained the exact details of his mission, and no one dared to ask. There were rumors, of course, whispers among the crew about his species, how they had a reputation for stirring strange, uncontrollable emotions in humans. Some said it was their biology, something about the way their pheromones interacted with human physiology. Others believed it was something more sinister, psychic abilities or subtle mind control. Lyra had brushed off the gossip, refusing to let herself be influenced by rumors. She was a pilot, a professional, and had no time for superstitions. But now, sitting across from him in the confined space of the cabin, with nothing but the quiet hum of the ship and the weight of his gaze pressing down on her, Lyra wasn't so sure. He hadn't said much since boarding the spacecraft, speaking only when necessary, his voice a deep, resonant timbre that sent a strange ripple through the air whenever he spoke. Every word from him seemed to carry a weight beyond its meaning, as though language itself bent to his will. Tonight was no different. They sat in silence, the air thick with an unspoken tension that neither of them acknowledged. Lyra tried to focus on the datapad in her hands, the blue glow of its screen casting sharp shadows on her face, but her mind was elsewhere, drawn to the figure sitting so still, so silently across from her. She chanced to glance at him. His head was slightly tilted, as if he were listening to something far away, though there was no sound but the soft hum of the engines. His posture was relaxed, one hand resting casually on his knee, the other draped over the armrest. And yet, despite his apparent calm, there was an underlying intensity in him, something just beneath the surface that hummed with barely contained energy. It was like standing next to a storm on the verge of breaking, the air alive with the promise of something electric and dangerous. Lyra swallowed hard, willing herself to breathe evenly, but her body betrayed her. Her pulse quickened, her skin prickling with a strange awareness of him that she couldn't shake. It was as if the space between them had shrunk, the small distance that separated their seats suddenly too vast and too close all at once. "You're tense," his voice cut through the silence, startling her. She looked up to find his eyes locked on hers, that same unyielding intensity burning in their depths. The corners of his lips curled upward in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I can feel it." His words, though softly spoken, hung in the air like a challenge. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, and she quickly averted her gaze, feigning disinterest. "I'm fine," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Just tired." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine since the moment he'd stepped on board, and she hated that he could see right through her. "Hashim," he murmured, his gaze never wavering. It was a sound of quiet amusement, as if her response had been expected, but not believed. Lyra shifted in her seat, the datapad now forgotten in her lap. She could feel his eyes on her, the heat of his attention like a physical presence. It was unnerving how aware of him she was, how her body seemed to react to him without her consent, her pulse quickening, her breath shallow, her skin tingling with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She had never been one to let emotions get the better of her, especially not on a mission, but there was something about him, something she couldn't explain. His presence stirred something deep inside her, something primal and unsettling. It wasn't attraction, not in the way she had understood it before, but rather an inexplicable pull, like gravity drawing her closer to the edge of something unknown and dangerous. "You're different from the others," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in the space between them. Lyra's brow furrowed. Different how? He leaned forward slightly, just enough to make the already small space feel even more intimate. "They avoid me," he said, his tone thoughtful, as if he were considering something deeply. "But you don't. You watch me." Her heart skipped a beat. He had noticed. Lyra opened her mouth to protest, to deny the accusation, but the words wouldn't come. She had watched him. She couldn't help it. He was too compelling, too strange. "What are you?" she asked, her voice softer now, more curious than defensive. He regarded her for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then, slowly, a small smile played at the edges of his lips. "Something you've never encountered before." The cryptic answer only fueled her curiosity. She leaned forward, the tension between them tightening like a drawn wire. "That's not an answer." His smile widened, just a fraction. "No, it's not." Lyra's frustration mounted, but it was tempered by the strange thrill of the exchange. There was something about him, something elusive that kept slipping through her grasp. She wanted to understand him, to know what lay beneath the surface of that calm, inscrutable exterior. But he was a puzzle, and the more she tried to piece him together, the more disoriented she felt. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper now. His dark eyes gleamed, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with an unseen energy. "Because I'm meant to be." The simplicity of the answer sent a shiver down her spine. He spoke with such certainty, as if his presence here on this ship with her was part of some larger design, something inevitable. Before she could press him further, the soft chime of the ship's intercom broke the moment. "Lyra, report to the cockpit," the voice of the captain crackled through the speakers. She blinked, the spell between them momentarily broken. Clearing her throat, she rose from her seat, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. But as she turned to leave, she felt his eyes on her once more, a silent reminder that their conversation wasn't over. And as she walked down the narrow corridor towards the cockpit, her mind raced with unanswered questions, her pulse still hammering in her chest.
Who was he, really? And why did she feel as though her fate was somehow intertwined with his?
In the dim glow of the spacecraft, Lyra had no idea that this was only the beginning, that the answers to those questions would lead her down a path far more dangerous and far more intimate than she could have ever imagined. The soft hiss of the door sliding shut behind her echoed louder in the silence than it should have. Lyra's pulse quickened as the quiet settled around her, thick and heavy. She stood in the center of the small room, her muscles tense, aware of every breath, every heartbeat. The dim lights of the spacecraft flickered slightly, casting a muted glow across the walls, and it was in that moment she realized just how small the room felt with him in it. He was standing by the observation port, his back turned to her, his silhouette framed against the backdrop of distant stars. His tall, imposing figure cut through the faint glow of starlight like a shadow. The strange, metallic sheen of his skin absorbed the light in a way that made him seem both part of the room and separate from it, like something otherworldly intruding on the normalcy of her life. For a brief, disorienting moment, Lyra forgot why she was there. The captain had sent her to relay a message, something about recalibrating the ship's systems, but it seemed so distant, so unimportant now. Her thoughts were tangled with the memory of their earlier conversation, the unspoken tension that had crackled between them like static in the air. He hadn't moved since she entered. Not a word, not a shift in his stance, just the steady rise and fall of his breath, barely perceptible beneath the smooth fabric of his uniform. The silence stretched, growing heavier by the second, until it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Lyra swallowed hard, trying to summon the resolve she always prided herself on, but here, alone in the room with him, it was slipping through her fingers like sand. The message. She needed to focus. "The captain asked me to." You're unsettled, his voice, low and resonant, cut through her words with the same disarming ease that had unnerved her before. He didn't turn to face her, but somehow she felt the full force of his attention as though he had. It was the sensation of being studied, peeled apart layer by layer, a quiet scrutiny that was both invasive and magnetic. "I'm fine," she said, too quickly. The words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Lyra shifted her weight from one foot to the other, suddenly acutely aware of her body, of the way her skin tingled under his presence. He finally turned to face her, slow and deliberate, his movements as fluid as water. When his dark, unfathomable eyes met hers, it was like the air had been sucked out of the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the silence between them deepened, pulling tighter, as though something invisible bound them together in a way neither could explain nor escape. "I can feel it," he said softly, taking a step toward her. His voice was even calm, but the weight of his words hit her like a storm on the horizon, the kind you could feel in your bones before the first drop of rain. The tension. The conflict inside you. Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. There was a strange gravity between them, pulling her in despite the warning bells clanging in her mind. It was more than attraction, more than curiosity. It was something primal, something far deeper. Her skin prickled as he took another step closer, the space between them shrinking to almost nothing. "You're wrong," she managed, though her voice was soft, her breath shallow. "I'm not." Before she could finish, he was there, standing inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. The air seemed to thrum with an unspoken energy, a palpable tension that made every hair on her body stand on end. Her heart was pounding, her pulse racing in her throat, but she refused to step back. She wouldn't let him see her fear, even if every instinct in her body screamed at her to run. His eyes flicked over her, lingering on her face, as though he were reading something she couldn't see. And then, without warning, he raised a hand, his fingers brushing lightly against her cheek. The touch was unexpected, almost tender, and it sent a jolt of electricity down her spine. His fingers were warm, impossibly so, and the brief contact made her breath hitch in her throat. Lyra's body reacted before her mind could catch up, her skin tingling in response, a rush of heat flooding her senses. "Your body tells a different story, Lyra," he murmured, his voice low, sending another shiver down her spine. His hand lingered at her cheek, his thumb grazing her skin with a softness that belied the intensity of the moment. Her name, spoken in his strange, lilting accent, sounded different coming from him. Intimate, almost dangerous. She tried to step back, to put some distance between them, but her back met the cold metal wall, and she was trapped. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide from the weight of his presence. He was too close, too overwhelming, and her mind was spinning with the intensity of it all. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His gaze darkened, and for the briefest moment, something flickered in his eyes, something powerful, primal, like a predator who had just caught the scent of its prey. "I want you to stop pretending." His words hung in the air between them, a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Stop pretending? Pretending what? That she wasn't affected by him, that his presence didn't stir something deep inside her that she couldn't quite name. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, though the breathlessness in her voice betrayed her lie. She was losing control of the situation, control of her emotions, and she hated it. Hated that he could see right through her, hated that she couldn't seem to pull herself away from the invisible force that connected them. His lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, and in that moment, Lyra realized he wasn't just looking at her, he was feeling her. It was as though he could sense every emotion, every thought that rippled beneath the surface of her calm facade. And then, before she could react, his hand moved. Slowly, almost lazily, he traced the line of her jaw with his fingers, his touch light but deliberate. Lyra's breath caught again, and she felt her body respond to the contact, a rush of heat spreading through her limbs. It was as if every nerve in her body had been set on fire, each one waking up to his touch in a way that both exhilarated and terrified her. "I told you," he whispered, his voice like silk against her skin. "I can feel it, your pulse, your energy. You're already responding to me." She wanted to deny it, wanted to push him away and regain the control she was so quickly losing, but her body had other ideas. Her skin burned where his fingers touched her, and her mind was spinning with sensations she hadn't felt in years. Her breathing quickened, her heart hammering in her chest, and it took everything she had not to fall into the dizzying pull of him. The alien leaned in closer, his breath ghosting over her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "You don't have to fight it, Lyra. There's no need to be afraid." But she was afraid, not of him, but of herself, of the way her body was reacting, of the way her mind was betraying her, slipping under the weight of his influence. Every instinct she had screamed for her to pull away, to reassert her control, but her body refused to obey. It was as though some invisible force was pulling her toward him, binding her to him in ways she didn't understand. His hand slid down her arm, leaving a trail of fire in its wake, and she couldn't stop the soft gasp that escaped her lips. He smiled at that, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of satisfaction and something darker. Something that sent a thrill of both fear and anticipation coursing through her. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured, his voice a low growl that sent vibrations through her very bones. "This connection between us, it's undeniable." Lyra's hands fisted at her sides, her nails digging into her palms in a desperate attempt to ground herself, to stop the whirlwind of emotions and sensations that were spinning out of control. She needed to stay focused, to keep her wits about her, but it was getting harder with each passing second, with every soft touch of his fingers against her skin. "I don't, tote." But before she could finish, his hand moved again, this time sliding beneath the hem of her uniform, his fingers brushing lightly against her waist. The touch was light, almost teasing, but it sent a shockwave of sensation through her, and Lyra's breath hitched. Her body tensed, her skin tingling where his fingers danced just below the fabric, and suddenly it became impossible to ignore the way her body was responding to him. Heat flooded her senses, and she felt her resolve crumbling under the intensity of it all. He leaned in closer, his lips brushing the edge of her jaw, as he whispered, "You're not as in control as you think you are." And he was right. She wasn't. The control she had always prided herself on was slipping away, unraveling under the weight of his presence, his touch, his voice. And deep down, in the part of herself she didn't want to acknowledge, Lyra knew that she had never stood a chance against him. With one final touch, one final, teasing brush of his hand against her skin, he pulled back, leaving her gasping, trembling with the intensity of it all. His dark eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched her struggle to regain her composure. "I told you you couldn't handle me," he said softly, his voice a mixture of mockery and certainty. And as he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the small room, Lyra knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. Lyra stood in the dim corridor of the spacecraft, staring blankly at the closed door in front of her. Her breath still hadn't fully evened out, and her skin tingled with the memory of his touch, too vivid, too sharp. Every time she closed her eyes, the sensation of his fingers on her skin rushed back, like an electric current sparking along her nerves. She had never felt anything like it, not even close. The worst part was that she couldn't shake the feeling that he knew. He knew exactly what effect he had on her, how her body betrayed her every time he got close. The arrogance in his voice when he'd whispered, "You're not in control," echoed in her mind, fueling a mix of anger, embarrassment, and something else she couldn't quite name. Fear, or was it something darker, something that scared her even more? She couldn't afford distractions, especially not now. They were deep in unknown space, navigating through territories that had never been charted by human hands. The mission was critical, and the crew was on edge. This was no time for personal entanglements or whatever strange connection was forming between her and the alien, but his presence clung to her like a second skin, inescapable. The hum of the ship, usually a source of comfort, felt too loud now, too close. Lyra straightened her posture, shaking off the lingering sensations and forcing herself to focus. She had a job to do, a mission that mattered more than anything happening in that confined room. Taking a deep breath, she pushed away from the door and headed down the narrow corridor toward the command center, her mind still spinning but her resolve beginning to harden. The command center was a stark contrast to the eerie quiet of the ship's other chambers. The space was illuminated with the cool glow of control panels, casting pale blue light over the crew. The captain stood at the helm, his eyes trained on the holographic display in front of him. Streams of data flowed like a river of light, constantly shifting as the ship's navigation system adjusted to the ever-changing terrain of space. Lyra appreciated the sharp efficiency of the scene. It was grounding. "Captain," she said as she entered, keeping her voice steady. She slid into her seat at the navigation console, her fingers automatically finding their place on the controls. Coordinates for the next jump are set. We should be clear to move once the engines finish charging. Captain Voss turned, his grizzled face hardening into a scowl. "Good. Keep us on alert. We're entering uncharted sectors. There could be anything out there." Lyra nodded, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. But even as her fingers danced across the controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory and monitoring the energy levels, her mind wandered. She could still feel him, even though he was far from the command center. It was as if some invisible tether connected them, something that had only grown stronger since their last encounter. Every time she thought she had pushed him out of her mind, the memory of his touch flared up, pulling her back into the vortex of emotions she'd been trying so desperately to suppress. It wasn't until several days later that Lyra found herself face to face with him again. The ship had fallen into a quiet rhythm, the crew operating on autopilot as they continued through the vast stretch of space ahead. The tension among them had eased slightly, the familiarity of their tasks settling in like muscle memory. But for Lyra, the tension had only grown, lingering like a shadow she couldn't shake. It happened when she least expected it, during a routine maintenance check on the ship's propulsion systems. She had been focused on her work, her hands deep in the wires and conduits that snaked through the walls, when she felt a presence behind her, watching, waiting. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him. The air had shifted, thickening with the same electric pull she had felt before. Her muscles tensed instinctively, but she forced herself to keep her focus on the task, even as her pulse quickened in response to his proximity. "You're not avoiding me, are you?" His voice was low, teasing, but there was an edge to it, a challenge that made her skin prickle. "I've been busy," she replied evenly, not looking up from her work. "We're in the middle of a mission, remember?" He was closer now, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, though he hadn't touched her yet. "Busy," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "I wonder if that's really the reason." Lyra's jaw tightened, but she kept her attention on the wires in front of her, refusing to let him see the way her body was reacting. "Is there something you need?" There was a pause, and she could feel his eyes on her, weighing her, measuring her. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he reached out and placed his hand over hers, stilling her fingers. The touch was light, barely more than a brush of his skin against hers, but it was enough to send a jolt through her system. She froze, her breath catching in her throat as the weight of his hand settled over hers, his warmth seeping into her skin. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the ship seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat thudding in her ears. His hand lingered firm but gentle, and when he spoke again, his voice was a soft murmur, too close. "You can feel it too, can't you? This connection between us." Lyra's fingers twitched under his, but she didn't pull away. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: anger, fear, curiosity, and something else she didn't want to name. She should have told him to stop, should have pulled her hand away and walked out of the room. But instead, she found herself frozen, unable to break the spell he had woven around her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, though the words sounded weak even to her own ears. His grip tightened slightly, just enough to remind her of his presence. "You do." His voice was a whisper now, barely more than a breath against her ear. "You can feel it, this pull, this need. You've been feeling it since the moment I came aboard." Her pulse raced, and for a split second, she thought about denying it again, about telling him to leave her alone and storming out of the room. But the truth was, she couldn't deny it anymore. She had felt it. From the moment she first laid eyes on him, there had been something between them, something raw and primal, like an invisible force pulling them toward each other. And no matter how hard she tried to fight it, that force had only grown stronger with every encounter. "I don't," she began, but the words were cut off as his other hand slid around her waist, pulling her gently but firmly against him. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she was paralyzed, her body caught between the instinct to flee and the overwhelming desire to lean into him. His touch was warm, almost soothing, but there was an undercurrent of danger to it, a quiet power that thrummed just beneath the surface. He was stronger than her, she knew that, and the knowledge sent a strange mix of fear and excitement coursing through her veins. "Stop fighting it," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "You know you want this." Lyra's mind raced, torn between the rational part of her that screamed at her to push him away and the part of her that was slowly, inexorably surrendering to the pull of him. His hand slid up her side, tracing the curve of her waist, and she felt a shiver run through her at the contact, her skin heating under his touch. Every nerve in her body seemed to come alive, sparking with sensation, and she hated how much she wanted more. "I don't know what you've done to me," she whispered, her voice trembling, "but this, whatever this is, it's not real." His lips brushed her ear, sending another shiver down her spine. "It's as real as you make it, Lyra." Her breath hitched as his hand slid beneath the fabric of her uniform, his fingers grazing the bare skin of her abdomen. The touch was light, teasing, but it was enough to send a wave of heat rushing through her, and she felt her resolve weakening, slipping away under the weight of the sensations he was stirring in her. "You don't have to fight it," he whispered again, his voice soft and dangerous. "Just let go." For a moment, Lyra hesitated, her body caught in the storm of emotions and sensations swirling around her. She should have pulled away. She should have told away. She should have told him to stop. But instead, she found herself leaning into him, her body betraying her once again as his touch sent a surge of pleasure through her. And that was when she felt it, a strange, pulsing sensation deep inside her, something foreign yet strangely familiar. It wasn't his touch that caused it, though his hand was still on her skin. It was something else, something deeper, as though he had reached into her and awakened something that had been dormant for a long time. Her eyes widened, and she gasped, her body tensing as the sensation grew stronger, more intense. "What? What is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. His lips brushed her neck, his voice a low murmur against her skin. "It's my gift to you." Lyra's heart raced, her mind spinning with the implications of his words. His gift? What had he done to her? And why did it feel so powerful? Before she could ask, the sensation intensified, pulsing through her in waves, each one stronger than the last. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before, pleasure and power mixed together in a heady, overwhelming rush. Her body bucked beneath him, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps as the strange, foreign energy surged through her. "What did you do to me?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. His lips curled into a smile against her skin. "I've awakened something inside you, something only my kind can give. You'll understand soon enough." Lyra's body trembled as the sensations continued to build, her mind overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. She didn't understand what was happening to her, didn't know what he had done, but one thing was clear: she was no longer in control. And as the last of her resolve crumbled under the weight of his influence, she realized with a sinking feeling that she might never be in control again. Lyra lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling, the low hum of the spacecraft's engines the only sound in the room. The stillness was a strange contrast to the storm of emotions that churned inside her. She was exhausted, her body spent, yet her mind refused to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, the memory of his touch, his voice, his strange, almost predatory presence washed over her. It had been days since the last encounter, but it lingered in her thoughts like a bruise that refused to fade. What had he done to her? Her hands shook slightly as she pressed her palms against the cool surface of the metal cot. She wanted to dismiss it, to tell herself that whatever strange connection she felt to him wasn't real, that it was some trick of her mind. But her body knew better. There was something inside her now, something alive that hadn't been there before. She could feel it pulsing beneath her skin, humming in time with her heartbeat. The alien had called it a gift, but it felt more like a curse. Rolling onto her side, Lyra squeezed her eyes shut, willing the thoughts away. She needed sleep. She needed clarity. Most of all, she needed to understand what was happening to her, but every question led her deeper into confusion, and she didn't know who to turn to. How could she explain it to anyone without sounding like she'd lost her mind? Her fingers pressed into her abdomen, where the pulse seemed to radiate the strongest. It was subtle, just under the surface, but it was constant, a reminder that something had changed, that she had changed. A knock on her door startled her, jolting her out of her thoughts. She sat up abruptly, her heart hammering in her chest. Lyra. It was Cora, one of the ship's engineers. Lyra exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing pulse before responding. "Come in," she called, her voice sounding more composed than she felt. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, and Cora stepped inside, her short frame illuminated by the faint glow of the hallway. She gave Lyra a small smile, but there was tension in her eyes, something worried and searching. "Hey," Cora said, her voice soft as she stepped closer. "I've been looking for you. Are you okay?" Lyra hesitated, trying to push the turmoil inside her to the back of her mind. "I'm fine," she replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Cora frowned, folding her arms across her chest. "You haven't been yourself lately. The captain's noticed too. You've been distracted." Lyra's stomach twisted. She knew Cora meant well, but the concern in her voice only deepened the sense of unease that had been gnawing at her since the alien's arrival. "I'm fine," Lyra repeated, a little too quickly. "Just the mission. It's been stressful." Cora gave her a long, searching look, clearly unconvinced. "If you say so. But if something's going on, if it's about him, you can tell me. You know that, right?" Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't mentioned the alien to anyone, not in any real detail. The rest of the crew kept their distance from him, whispering about his strange presence, but no one had approached her directly about him. Not until now. "It's nothing," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "He's unsettling, sure, but it's nothing I can't handle." Cora sighed, running a hand through her short, messy hair. "I don't like the way he looks at you," she admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's like, I don't know, like he's studying you. It gives me the creeps." Lyra swallowed hard, trying to keep her expression neutral. The truth was, Cora wasn't wrong. The alien's gaze felt like it pierced through her, unraveling her thoughts, her emotions, like she was nothing more than a puzzle to him, something to be understood and then controlled. The memory of his eyes, dark and fathomless, sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm fine," Lyra said again, though this time the words felt hollow. "Really?" Cora studied her for a moment longer, then nodded, though the doubt in her expression remained. "All right," she said, though the tension didn't leave her voice. "Just be careful, okay? He's not like us." Lyra forced a smile, but as Cora turned to leave, her heart clenched. Cora didn't know the half of it. Later that evening, as Lyra sat alone in the small, cramped room where the alien had first touched her, the silence weighed heavily on her. She had come here to find some peace, some clarity, but instead she felt suffocated by the memories that still lingered in the air. The pulse in her abdomen was stronger now, as though it were reacting to her surroundings, to the very place where it had begun. Her fingers brushed lightly over the spot, and she shuddered at the faint vibration beneath her skin. It wasn't painful, if anything, it felt strangely alive, almost comforting. But it was a reminder that something inside her had changed, that she was no longer the person she had been before. And then she felt it. A presence. A subtle shift in the air that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him. The air seemed to thrum with the same energy that had filled the room the last time they were together, an invisible thread pulling tighter between them. "I knew you'd come," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear that coiled deep in her gut. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. He stood just inside the doorway, his tall figure shrouded in shadows. The soft light from the corridor cast an otherworldly glow on his metallic skin, giving him an almost ethereal appearance. His eyes, dark and gleaming, fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart pound in her chest. "Did you?" he asked, his voice a low, resonant murmur that seemed to vibrate through the room. "Or did you hope I wouldn't?" Lyra swallowed hard, her pulse racing. She should have been afraid, terrified, even, but instead, she felt something else. A strange, simmering anticipation that she couldn't explain. "You've been avoiding me," he said, stepping closer. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. "Why?" Lyra's mouth went dry as he approached, her body reacting to his presence in ways she couldn't control. The pulse inside her quickened, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat, and she could feel the strange, alien energy stirring within her, responding to him. "I don't know what you've done to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this isn't right." He stopped just a few feet from her, his gaze never leaving hers. "You think it's wrong because you don't understand it." Lyra's breath hitched. "What did you do to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What is this thing inside me?" He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out and placed his hand over her abdomen, right where the pulse was strongest. The touch was gentle, but it sent a shock wave of sensation through her, and she gasped, her body tensing as the alien energy flared to life beneath his hand.
"It's part of you now," he said softly, his voice like silk against her skin. "A gift. A connection."
Lyra's eyes widened, her mind racing with questions, with fear, with a strange, unsettling desire that was growing stronger with every passing second. "Connection," she repeated, her voice shaking. "What does that mean?" His hand remained on her abdomen, his touch light but possessive. "You feel it, don't you? The way your body responds to mine? It's not just desire. It's something deeper, something primal." Her pulse pounded in her ears as the alien energy surged through her, and she realized with a sinking feeling that he was right. It wasn't just attraction. It was something far more dangerous, something that reached into the core of who she was and changed her. "I don't want this," she whispered, though her body betrayed her, leaning into his touch. His lips curled into a faint smile. "You say that, but your body tells a different story." Lyra's breath quickened as his hand slid lower, tracing the edge of her uniform. Every touch sent sparks of sensation rippling through her, and she could feel the energy inside her responding, growing stronger, more insistent. Her mind was a whirl of confusion and need, torn between the desire to push him away and the overwhelming urge to give in, to surrender to whatever this was between them. "I don't understand," she began, but her voice faltered as his other hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly over her skin. "You don't have to understand," he whispered, his voice low and seductive. "Just feel." His lips were on hers before she could respond, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The kiss was slow, deliberate, his mouth moving against hers with a gentleness that belied the raw power she knew he possessed. And yet, beneath the softness, there was an intensity, a hunger that simmered just beneath the surface. Lyra's body reacted instantly, her hands fisting in the fabric of his uniform as the energy inside her flared to life. It was like a current, running through her veins, connecting her to him in ways she didn't understand but couldn't deny. She gasped against his lips as the alien pulse in her abdomen intensified, sending waves of pleasure rippling through her. Her knees buckled, and he caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist, holding her steady as the sensations overwhelmed her. "Let go," he whispered against her lips. "Surrender to it." Her mind screamed at her to resist, to push him away, but her body was already betraying her, leaning into him, into the heat of his touch, the intensity of the connection between them. And then, with a final, shuddering breath, Lyra surrendered. The alien energy surged through her like a storm, overwhelming every sense, every thought. It was pleasure, yes, but it was more than that. It was power, raw and untamed, coursing through her veins, fusing with her very being. She could feel it, feel him in every cell of her body, as if they had become one in that moment, their connection unbreakable. Her head fell back, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps as the sensations tore through her, leaving her trembling in his arms. She had never felt anything like it, so powerful, so intense, so completely out of her control. And as the last of the pleasure ebbed away, leaving her breathless and shaken, she realized with a sinking feeling that she had crossed a line she could never come back from. She was his now, in body and mind and soul. And there was no turning back. Lyra stood by the observation deck, gazing into the endless void of space. The stars, once a source of comfort and wonder, felt distant and cold now, reflecting the turmoil swirling inside her. Space had always been a place of solitude for her, a reminder that no matter how vast and overwhelming her problems seemed, they were but fleeting blips in the grand scheme of the universe. But now, that vastness felt stifling, as if the very stars were closing in on her. The faint hum of the ship's engines vibrated beneath her feet, a familiar, grounding sound. Yet it did little to settle the unease pulsing beneath her skin. She could still feel it, the strange energy thrumming through her body, a reminder of the alien force that had been awakened inside her. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was deeper than that, as if something fundamental within her had shifted. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, where the pulse seemed strongest, a constant reminder that things had irrevocably changed. It had been days since their last encounter, but the memory of his presence, his touch, lingered, occupying her thoughts like an echo she couldn't shake. She hadn't sought him out since then. In fact, she'd been avoiding him, avoiding the strange pull she felt toward him. But even in his absence, she couldn't escape it. The connection between them was like a tether, binding her to him, growing stronger with each passing day. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to push the thoughts away, trying to regain the control she had always prided herself on. But it was slipping through her fingers. No matter how hard she tried to resist, the truth was becoming harder to deny. He had changed her. The door to the observation deck slid open behind her, and Lyra didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She could feel him, the way the air seemed to shift when he entered the room. Her breath hitched, her body tensing instinctively, though she tried to force herself to remain calm. He stepped into the room quietly, his movements smooth and deliberate. Even without looking, she could sense him standing there, watching her, his presence like a weight pressing down on her. She kept her eyes on the stars, refusing to acknowledge him. But the silence between them was thick, almost palpable, and her heart pounded in her chest, betraying the calm facade she was trying to maintain. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice resonant in the quiet room. It was a simple word, but the sound of it sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't respond at first, her hands gripping the edge of the observation window as if anchoring herself. She could feel the strange, alien pulse inside her quickening, responding to him, and it frightened her how easily her body seemed to react in his presence. "You've been avoiding me," he said, stepping closer. His tone was calm, but there was something beneath it, something quiet and insistent. Lyra's jaw tightened, and she took a slow breath before finally speaking. "I needed space," she said, her voice low but steady. He moved closer, the sound of his footsteps barely audible against the floor. She could feel the heat of his body now, standing just behind her, close enough that his presence enveloped her, though they weren't quite touching. It was as if the air between them was charged, buzzing with unspoken tension. "You can't run from what's inside you," he said softly, his voice a murmur that seemed to vibrate through her. "You know that." Her pulse quickened, the words hitting too close to the truth. She pressed a hand to her abdomen again, feeling the faint thrum of the energy beneath her skin, and she swallowed hard, trying to maintain control. She hated how right he was, hated how he seemed to understand what was happening inside her better than she did. "You did this to me," she said, her voice quiet but laced with frustration. "You've changed me, and I don't even know who I am anymore." He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "You're still you, Lyra. You've just evolved." She closed her eyes, her fingers curling into tight fists. "I never asked for this," she whispered, feeling the weight of her words. His hand brushed her shoulder, a light, tentative touch that made her breath catch. She could feel the warmth of him through the fabric of her uniform, and her body tensed at the contact. His touch was soft, but it carried with it the same strange pull she had felt since the beginning, a magnetic force she couldn't explain. "I didn't take anything from you," he said quietly, his fingers tracing the curve of her arm. "I gave you something. You're stronger now, more attuned to the world around you." Lyra's breath came in shallow bursts, her heart racing as his hand lingered on her arm. She wanted to pull away, to tell him to stop, but her body refused to obey. The connection between them was too strong, and every touch sent a ripple of sensation through her, stirring the strange energy that lived inside her. His other hand slid around her waist, resting lightly against her side, and Lyra's body tensed as the heat of his presence seemed to envelop her. She could feel his breath on her neck, and her pulse quickened, her mind spinning with a mix of emotions she couldn't untangle. She wanted to resist, but the pull was too strong, too overwhelming. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered, his voice soft, soothing. "You're not losing yourself. You're becoming something more." Her eyes fluttered closed, and she took a shuddering breath, trying to make sense of the storm of feelings inside her. She could feel the energy pulsing in her abdomen, responding to his presence, growing stronger with every moment. It was as if the alien force inside her was calling to him, drawing her closer, erasing the distance between them. "I don't want to lose control," she said, her voice barely audible. His hand slid up her arm, gently turning her to face him. When she opened her eyes, she found herself staring into his, those dark, unfathomable depths that seemed to hold the answers to questions she wasn't ready to ask. His gaze was intense, but there was a quiet understanding in his eyes, as if he could sense the conflict inside her. "You don't need to control it," he said softly. "Just let it be." Lyra's breath hitched as his hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly against her skin. The touch was warm, comforting, and her body instinctively leaned into it, craving the connection, despite the confusion in her mind. She hated how much she wanted it, how much she wanted him, but there was no denying the truth anymore. "I can't," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you can," he murmured, his hand sliding to the back of her neck. "You're stronger than you realize, Lyra. You don't need to fight this." She trembled as his other hand rested gently on her waist, pulling her closer. The distance between them disappeared, and she could feel the warmth of his body against hers, the strange energy inside her flaring to life as their connection deepened. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts, her mind spinning as the sensations overwhelmed her. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. His fingers traced gentle patterns on her skin, his touch soothing but insistent. "There's nothing to fear," he said softly. "You're not losing anything. You're gaining something far more powerful." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning, and Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she stood on the edge of a decision she wasn't sure she was ready to make. The connection between them was undeniable, the force that bound them together growing stronger with every touch, every breath. And though part of her wanted to resist, to pull away, the truth was that another part of her, a part she could no longer ignore, wanted this. With a trembling breath, Lyra let go. She let go of the fear, the doubt, the need to control. She surrendered to the connection, to the strange, undeniable force that had drawn them together from the beginning. And in that moment, she truly felt it. The energy inside her surged to life, filling her with a warmth and power so intense it left her breathless. She gasped, her body trembling as the sensations washed over her, overwhelming every sense. It was like being set on fire from the inside, but instead of burning, the flames filled her with a sense of clarity, of purpose. She had crossed a threshold, one she couldn't return from. But instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of peace. She was no longer fighting, no longer resisting. She had accepted what was happening, embraced the connection between them. As the warmth of his touch anchored her in the moment, Lyra realized that this wasn't the end of her journey, it was just the beginning. Lyra's breath came in short, trembling gasps as the weight of her surrender settled over her like a heavy, but oddly comforting blanket. Every cell in her body felt electrified, alive with the alien energy that now thrummed through her veins in time with her heartbeat. She stood there, enveloped in his warmth, his presence so close, so consuming, that she felt as though they were no longer two separate beings but one, connected by something far deeper than the physical. His eyes, dark and intense, never left hers. He had her now, completely, and they both knew it. The air between them was thick with the unspoken, with the knowledge that whatever had been set into motion was now beyond either of their control. "You're not afraid anymore, are you?" he asked softly, his hand still resting on her waist, his touch grounding her even as the storm inside her raged. Lyra shook her head, her throat too tight to speak. The fear, the resistance that had once held her back, had faded, replaced by something else, something she didn't fully understand, but which no longer terrified her. It wasn't just desire, though that was undeniably part of it. It was deeper than that, more primal. The energy inside her had awakened something within her, something that recognized him, responded to him in ways that went beyond words. "What do you feel?" he asked, his voice a low murmur that seemed to resonate through her, vibrating in the core of her being. She took a deep breath, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions and sensations coursing through her. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like everything is more. The stars, the air, even you. It's like I'm seeing the universe for the first time." His lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. "That's because you are." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at him, the weight of his gaze making her feel exposed, vulnerable, and yet strangely safe. She had never felt this way before, had never experienced such a profound sense of connection to another person. It was overwhelming, yes, but also exhilarating. She had spent so long trying to hold on to control, to keep herself walled off from the world, from others. But now, with him, those walls had crumbled, and for the first time she wasn't sure she wanted to rebuild them. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling with the enormity of the question. "What's happening to me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted a hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin. The simple gesture sent a shiver down her spine, and she closed her eyes, leaning into the touch, letting herself be enveloped by the warmth of his presence. "This is who you are," he said softly, his voice like a soothing balm to the storm inside her. "This is what you were always meant to become. The connection between us, it's not something I forced on you. It was always there, waiting to be awakened." Lyra opened her eyes, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of his words. But why me? Why now? He gazed at her, his expression unreadable, but there was a gentleness in his eyes that made her heart ache. "You've always been different, Lyra. Even before you met me, you felt it, didn't you? That pull, that sense that there was something more out there, something bigger than yourself." She nodded slowly, her mind racing with memories of the restless nights she had spent staring out at the stars, wondering if there was something beyond the life she had known, something calling to her from the depths of space. She had never been able to explain it, had always pushed it aside as mere curiosity or wanderlust. But now, standing here with him, she realized that it had been more than that. It had been the first stirrings of the connection that now bound them together. "I've been waiting for someone like you," he continued, his voice low and soothing. "Someone who could feel the universe the way I do, someone who could share in the power, the responsibility that comes with it. You weren't ready before, but now you are." Lyra's heart skipped a beat as his words sank in. She had never asked for this, had never imagined herself as part of something so vast and unknowable. And yet, deep down, a part of her had always wanted to be more than just another human lost in the endless expanse of space. She had always known she was meant for something greater, even if she hadn't understood what that meant. "And you?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. "What do you get out of this?" His gaze softened, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, something raw and unguarded. "I've been alone for a long time," he said softly. "Longer than you can imagine. I've watched the stars rise and fall, seen civilizations come and go. And through it all, I've been searching for someone who could understand, someone who could share the weight of this power." He paused, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're that person, Lyra. "You're the one I've been waiting for." Her heart ached at the raw honesty in his voice, and for the first time she saw him not as the powerful, enigmatic figure who had changed her life, but as someone who had been searching, just as she had. Someone who had been waiting for a connection, for a sense of belonging, for something more. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand, her fingers curling around his. His hand was warm, solid, grounding, and she felt the pulse of the alien energy inside her surge in response to the contact. But this time, it didn't feel overwhelming or frightening. It felt right, natural. "Then what happens now?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with a quiet strength. "What do we do?" He smiled, and there was a warmth in his eyes that made her heart flutter. "We face the universe together," he said simply. "We become what we were always meant to be." Lyra's chest swelled with emotion, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel afraid. She had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for: connection, purpose, belonging. She squeezed his hand, a small but powerful gesture, and smiled. Together. As they stood there, hand in hand, staring out at the endless expanse of space, Lyra knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers or unknowns they would face, she wouldn't be facing them alone. The alien energy inside her pulsed with a steady, reassuring rhythm, no longer a force to be feared, but a part of her, a part of them. And as the stars burned bright in the distance, Lyra allowed herself to hope for the future, for the unknown, for whatever came next. Together, they would face it all.